students, welcome to Accounting 1329, Payroll and Business Tax Accounting. This is Dr. Mercado speaking, and this is going to be the last lecture that I record for homework 6A, dealing with Chapter 6, Analyzing and Journalizing Payroll. Okay, so let me go ahead and jump over to the problem that we're going to be covering today. Okay, this is problem 6-13A, and yes, it's long, okay? So make sure that when you're reading, you read to comprehend what is it that the problem is telling you. Okay, be very careful. Read it a couple of times maybe if you don't understand, so you can clearly identify what the question is providing and what it is asking. Okay, so here it states, in Oregon, employers who are covered by the state workers' compensation law withhold employee contributions from the wages of covered employees for the workers' benefit fund at the rate of 1.1 cent for each hour or part of an hour that the worker is employed. Every covered employer is also assessed 1.1 cent per hour for each worker employed for each hour or part of an hour. So both the employee and the employer are paying this 1.1 cent per hour, okay? The employer-employee contributions for workers' compensation are collected monthly, quarterly, or annually by the employer's insurance carrier according to a schedule agreed upon by the employer and the carrier. The insurance carrier remits the contributions to the state's workers' compensation department. Now, Cortez Company, a covered employer in Oregon, turns over the employer-employee workers' compensation contributions to its insurance carrier by the 15th of each month for the preceding month. During the month of July, the number of full-time employee hours worked by the company's employees was 8,270. The number of part-time employee hours was 1,950. Requirement A, and we're tackling each requirement one at a time, okay? That way we don't get overwhelmed with information, okay? So requirement A says, what is the amount of the company should have withheld from its full and part-time employees during the month of July for workers' compensation insurance, okay? So the first thing we have to figure out is the full-time employee hours, okay? According to the problem, okay, our full-time employee hours was 8,270, okay? So we're going to go ahead and put that there, 8,270. We also have to add our part-time employee hours. And we had part-time employee hours of 1950. Okay, so this is the total hours worked by both our full-time and part-time employees. Okay, and remember, we're paying 1.1 cent for each hour or part of an hour worked. Okay, so my total hours, okay, my total hours is going to be the sum of those two. So we're going to add those two together. Okay, so I'm going to add those two together. And we can do it here in Excel, or you can just do it in your calculator, 8,270. I'm having problems with my mouse. Here you go. 8,270 plus 1950 gives you 10,220. Okay? Now we need to multiply it by the contribution rate. Okay? Okay. And the problem says 1.1 cent. I'm going to divide that by 100 because we have 100 cents in a dollar. Okay? And let's see what that gives us so we can get the actual rate. It's 1.1 cent divided by 100. That's going to be a contribution rate of 0.011. Okay? 0.011. That will be my contribution rate. Okay? So now I can just multiply. Okay? I'm going to multiply my 10,220 times 0.011, and that's going to give me a withholding of $112.42. Okay, of $112.42. Okay, so that is requirement A. So all we basically do is have to get the total of the hours worked, multiplied by the contribution rate is 1.1 cent divided by 100. That will give us our contribution rate of 0.011. We multiply the total hours times our rate, and that gives us our withholding of 112.42. Okay. Now, letter B. What is the title you would give to the general ledger liability account to which the amount withheld from the employee's earnings would be credited? Okay, and here they're talking about withheld for the employee's earnings would be credited. And there's several options that you can use. Okay, the most common, of course, would be workers' compensation, insurance payable. God, if I could spell. There we go. We could also use workers' compensation, insurance collected. Or we can use workers' compensation, insurance withheld. Okay. These are just some of the options that you could utilize when entering your transactions in our actual journal. These are some options. They're asking you the title that you would give the account. Okay. And of course, the most common would be using the payable account. Okay. So that is letter B. Okay. Now, letter C says, journalize the entry on July the 31st to record the employer's liability for workers' compensation insurance for the month. So here they're asking us to journalize the entry to record the employer's liability. Now, in this particular problem, the employer and the employee are paying or contributing the same amount, 1.1 cent. Okay, so that gave us the 112.42. That is for both the employee and employer. Okay, so in letter C, they're asking us to, let me see, okay, to journalize the entry to record the employer's liability for workers' compensation insurance for the month. Okay, so this is the account this is an expense to us, the company. Okay, so we would have an expense for workers' compensation insurance expense. Okay, and let me go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger, and then we will have, let me label this debit and credit. Okay, debit and credit. Okay, so we have workers' compensation insurance expense for the amount of 112.42. Remember, it's the same amount for the employee and for the employer. And then we would put the money into our workers' compensation insurance payable account. Okay, so all we're doing is we're recording the expense. This is how much we have to pay for the workers' compensation insurance, 112.42. It's an expense to the business, to the company. And we're putting it into the payable because we're going to have to remit payment on the 15th of each month. Okay, so this is the employer's portion. It says here, record the employer's liability. This is how much the employer is responsible for. And then the employee is responsible for the same amount, 112.42. Okay, now letter D. Journalize the entry on August the 15th to record the actual payment to the insurance carrier of the amount withheld from the employee's earnings for workers' compensation insurance and the amount of the employer's liability. Okay, so we have to remit payment for both what we withheld from the employees and what the employer is responsible for, which is the same amount. So now we are actually remitting the payment. So we're going to take money out. Now, depending on how your human resources department or your accounting department wants to handle this, they can either have one account for the employee and then one account for the employer, or they can just lump everything together into one payable account. For me, I would put everything into just one payable account, put the employee's contributions and put the employer's contribution into one account, and then I'll just take the money out from there. Okay, so what am I going to do? I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take the money out from my workers' compensation insurance payable. Okay, so I'm taking the money out of my payable, and when I take money out, I debit my account. Now, how much money am I going to take out? Well, I'm going to take out 112.42 that was put in for my employees withholding. Plus, I'm going to take out 112.42, which was the part that was put in by the employer. Okay, so the employer put in 112.42. The employees put in 112.42. So that will give me 224.84. So that is the amount I'm taking out. Okay. And what am I doing? Well, I'm remitting payment. I'm going to issue out a check. So that would be my cash would decrease by 224.84. Okay. So remember, in this entry, you can either have one entry, both the amount of the employee and the employer gets put into the same account, or let me put here or. This could be another option. Okay. You could have workers' compensation, insurance payable. Maybe this is the amount that we use for the employer. And then we have workers' compensation, insurance collected. This is what we collected from the employees, 112.42. And then we would go ahead and we would offset against cash of 224.84. Okay, so it just depends what your company does. If they're putting the employees and the employer's contribution into just one general ledger account, which is the case here, you take the full amount out and you make a check. If you want to keep separate records of what was collected from the employees, what was collected from the employer, then you use two accounts and then you just take the money from each of those accounts and then you issue out a check for the 224.84. Okay, so those are the four requirements for this particular problem. Okay, fairly straightforward. The key here is to making sure that we do our math correct. Once we get our math right, that amount would be the same contribution for the employee and for the employer. Okay, because it's the same formula unless they have different rates. That could be the case. Maybe the employee pays a certain rate and the employer pays a different rate. Then you would have to do two calculations, one for the employee, one for the employer. In this problem, both the employee and the employer pay the 1.1 cent, so we just had to do one calculation. Okay, so that is it for this problem. Make sure that you read the chapter. Make sure that you are aware of your assignment deadlines, that you do not leave everything for the last minute. Okay, remember, I am available Monday through Friday. I do not guarantee that I will respond to any emails or any correspondence received during the weekend. So please make sure to work on your assignments during the week. That way I can be able to assist you timely and you can be able to submit your homework and not have any questions about what you're submitting. Okay, so just make sure that you meet the deadlines. Refer to your syllabus for all of your deadlines. And remember, in Blackboard, I also post weekly announcements reminding you of your assignments. Okay, so make sure that you complete all of your assignments. And if you have questions, reach out to me and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you very much.